Thank you very much for coming out here in the morning with such good force, and thank you MMA and all dignitaries for participating. I will try and see what you have answered, and some of it is right, some of it is somewhere in the middle. We'll see how it goes. So if you can put up the PPT. So what I'll do is I'll just take you through the key findings of the report. There are a lot of other findings which you will see in the actual when you see the digital copy of the report. Okay, so we have only 10 minutes, so I'll just take you through the quickly what we say. So in last few years, there has been a significant gain in terms of women employment in urban. So please remember, we are talking only about urban India right now and not rural. Traditionally, in urban India, employment of women has been lower than in rural areas because in rural, a lot of employment is in farm and related sectors. So there's a 10% increase in last, from 2017-18. And in overall, but as well as in every sub-age group. So if you see in women in 20s, women in 30s, women in 40s, in 50s, in every age group, there has been an increase. Okay, so that's a big positive, of course. However, despite this increase, urban employment of women remains close to 30% and not optimistic 40% that I think the majority of the audience thought. Generally what happens, we know only people who are similar to us, and if our friends work, we extrapolate and we think, majority else are also working. But measured employment and women employment, whatever is measured, there is an underestimation bias because a lot of women, if they're home-based, if they're doing some earning, they don't record in a survey, they don't say I'm working. Okay, so there is definitely underestimation bias, but nonetheless, it is only close to 30%. In urban India, however, there are better quality jobs and people or women earn more than in rural India. So even though lesser work, they are essentially many more. Half of them are in regular salaried employment. So, that's definitely, much better. Within the different age groups, around 38% in their 40s. So you can see, you can relate easily as the children grow up and so on, more women can join workforce. So women who are in their 40s essentially have a higher employment rate than rest of the age groups, even though in every age group we have seen the increase in participation of women. But if only 30% are right now employed, and which is an improvement, that nonetheless means large number of women remain outside the workforce. Okay, and if we try to put a number, because generally people like to remember it in terms of absolute numbers, how much that comes to. It is essentially around 89 million only in urban India, the women who are not in workforce. So if we compare to other countries, in India, we are saying 30%, in the rest of the world, even in developing countries, 60%, 70% women work. Okay. So if you see, that means essentially the entire population of, France, UK, Germany, or 3 times Australia, we are talking only about women and women only in urban India, right? And if we see out of these, how many are highly educated, that is at least graduates and above, there are 19 million women in urban India who are graduates and above are not currently in employment. Okay, so there is a lot of untapped potential, of course, for women itself, for their empowerment, but also for the economy. So if I see from the macro angle, in general, the numbers are put out in various reports, like if all these women work, how much GDP will increase and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of untapped potential to it. However, and positive thing is, the proportion of women working can significantly go up further because in education, we see now there is gender parity. Even if you see, in fact, this proportion is slightly higher only for women who are in age group. But you can see even in early 20s, men and women, 30% of them are still in higher education. So there is almost complete, on an average, gender parity in urban India as far as education levels go. Second positive thing, positive from the labor market perspective, is women are getting married, women, and that means men also, are getting married later. So if you see in 1999-2000, around 60% of, 61-62% of women in the age group of 20 to 24 were married. That proportion is significantly down now to less than 40%. Marriage nonetheless remains universal in India. You can see in 30s, almost the entire, nearly everyone is married. But nonetheless, if the marriage is delayed and the education is rising, single women have much more opportunity to participate in the labor market and have wholesome jobs before, they start their families, okay, which is, of course, is going to be a big positive. So these are, positive sides, progress side, and of course, Mr. Suresh Raman will, speak a lot about, I suppose, IT and how at the starting level, the employment of women is 40% plus. And Mr. Mahalingam spoke about, women at the higher leadership level and how much progress. He said he hasn't seen our report, but our report exactly starts with that. That at the political leadership, presidents, prime ministers, finance ministers, lot of state chief ministers, all of them have been women, but how that has not translated into at the lower levels in terms of empowerment. However, we also asked you a question about the unemployment rates. And who you think between men and women have the higher unemployment rates among young adults. So here you go. Majority of us thought it is women unemployment rates which are higher. In reality, men unemployment rates are higher in 20s. So what that suggests? It suggests that we have to create jobs for both women and men, right? But you were partly right. If you had considered in your mind only about highly educated workforce, then it reverses. That is, women unemployment is higher than the men unemployment. So it's okay. You were right also partly, and you are wrong. Okay, so it depends on whether we look at the overall picture or we look at only higher. But whichever graph we look at, in early 20s, unemployment rates are high, right? And that means we need simply much more quality jobs. And, a lot of corporates are here, and we know very well, and there are some results in the report where we show that essentially, unless the quality job creation increases massively, it will be very difficult for women employment to increase significantly. Okay. And why that is the case? Because if you see, even though the men unemployment is higher in 20s, virtually every man is in employment when it comes to the, by late 20s, one has to get married. And that means one has to have some earning because there is a still male breadwinner norm that men have to work. And that means finally, whatever job is available, men take. That means men employment becomes nearly 100% if you see, right? So because now we say there are norms for women, there are strong norms for men as well, right? So so we have to accept that. And since that is the case, women's job really cannot come at the expense of men, right? We have to have jobs for both. So that means in 20s, in this early 20s, for highly educated workforce, we really need much more jobs if we have to avoid essentially diversity backlash. So you see, this is the survey which we had done some time back within Great Lakes, highly educated workforce, right? That is MBA postgraduates. You clearly see, means these may be perceptions. It may not always be reality, right? We are not saying corporates always do this. But even if perception is there that women are favored because of, percentage of women percentage need to go up, then that's not nice. And what Dean Suresh spoke about the diversity backlash, elsewhere, maybe that's coming here. Maybe it's coming after 5 years. Maybe it's coming after 8 years. But it's coming unless the overall number of jobs go up. Okay, so that is one thing. So there is a lot more in the report about this, which you can read, different results. But this will remain very true. It is not like women against men. It has to be women and men and jobs for everyone, essentially. And if that does not happen, that is, if overall number of jobs don't go up, and that means if women employment proportions don't go up, and if we compare to China and India, we know we have a lot of demographic dividend, right? We have talked about it for several years now, I think couple of decades. Now there is a talk about how India will age in another 20 years, right? So for many years we are talking. So if you see this blue line, dotted blue line, that is the proportion of number of working age population in India. Other line is number of working age population in China. So clearly China is aging, right? All of us know that. But now if you see how many people actually work in the sense are in paid work. A lot of people work, women also work at home, men also work at home, but that is unpaid. When I say work, I'm just saying right now employment in paid work. if you use the same labor force participation rate or employment rate currently, China will continue to have lot more people employed for foreseeable future, right? And that means we saying we have demographic dividend, essentially our demographic dividend, we are not utilizing at all because they are not in employment. Okay, so even if China is aging and their average age of workforce is increasing, nonetheless, simply by number of hands, China will have lot more people in work. And this is only related to women because all the men work in China, all means virtually all, and virtually all the men work in India as well. Okay, so this gap essentially comes only because of lower employment among women. Okay, so this we must keep in mind. I think there's a question about, this is our primary survey or the research we did recently about among highly educated couples, and there was one question about that. Equal career priority, this is very heartening. A majority of the couples say that there is an equal career priority, but when the priority is for one, then of course the male career takes priority, and only in 5% of families female career is priority. That is what they answer. Not really unexpected because these are young couples. There will be small child at home, so essentially mother takes the primary responsibility. But when they say 65% say that have an equal career priority, in 62%, husbands earn more, right? So even if it's an equal career priority, maybe industries differ, maybe number of hours they can put in is differs. So majority of the families still even they are similarly educated, men earn more. Wife, you were right. I think majority answered like around 20% of women in couples, women earn more. That was you're very close. In 70% women earn, wives earn more. And when it comes to perception about if there is equal merit, whether career progressions are different, right? 65% of women believe career progression is different, even when the merit is same. Only 38% of men believe that career progression is different when the merit. So we'll get into the reasons because if I explain it will just take too long. So we'll just tell you the numbers right now. When there is a panel discussion next, we will discuss about this lot more. But clearly the perceptions differ quite a bit. When I'm saying motherhood penalty, in the sense we are comparing between rural and urban. So in urban India, around 44% of single women work. That is before they get married, right? After marriage, there is a significant drop. Among all married young women, only 33% work. And with the arrival of a child, only around 20% work. In rural India, this doesn't happen. There is no drop between married and a mother with a child because maybe work is much more flexible. Farm work, you can carry the baby as well. In urban India, jobs will be essentially regular salary jobs are like full time, right? Means now, of course, work from home has come, but in general, before that. So that means, of course, there are a lot of policy. One policy which haven't explored enough in India is whether we have, of course, 6-month maternity leave and all that, but we have, and the corporates have to provide, I think, the child care on the premises. But one thing we haven't explored as in Western countries, child care in the school itself, after school hours. Right? Because then child doesn't have to be transported elsewhere and so on and so forth. So anyway, we can discuss that later, but there's a significant drop. We did another survey on remote work. That is when women are working from home, what are their perceptions about stress level, productivity, those kind of questions. So around 1 in 2 women report higher productivity while working from home and their stress level are essentially lower. However, around half of them, 46%, essentially worry about the longer work hours. So here the work would mean office work, as well as those who work from home will know when you're at home, essentially is dual job, right? So housework, and so overall number of hours just increase. Multitasking becomes too much. When you're at home, it is like at office, it's different. You can finish that and come home and do, but here you're all the time doing multitasking. So definitely half of the women worry about that. And there is also perception. I'm saying perception because I don't know whether this is reality. Okay, so the right word to use is perception. Around 40% of mothers believe that they do not have equal chance of promotion despite doing all the work and despite being productive if they are working from home. So these are some of the things maybe corporates can look at, how you overcome these perceptions when you allow, women or anyone, women, men, to work from home, what we can do about it. Some unspoken barrier, not unspoken, relatively less explored or hidden barriers is single women are working in much higher proportion, right? But in India, large majority of women move even in urban areas after marriage. And that means even if you're having a job before marriage, essentially it becomes very difficult to hold on to jobs, and you have to, search again. The whole process has to start again. So this is one, unspoken barriers. Women migration for employment is only 3%, right? That also suggests there are some barriers in terms of maybe how single women can come to cities and stay in a safe environment. And I know, for example, Tamil Nadu state government is doing a lot of work in terms of working women's hostel and making them safe and clean and up to date. Such kind of policies will be really required. Urban spot, if, the cities just grow whichever way it grow, then the commuting becomes longer. So these are the issues, which women struggle with when they try to work. One one of our findings, I want to little bit talk about here, which is counterintuitive to what we may think, is women who are employed face higher domestic violence. We normally would not think that, because women who work have earning power. They have definitely more bargaining power in the terms of decision making at home. They definitely have more mobility. All that is positive. But you see this, which is 32% of women who are employed, they themselves justify violence against them compared to women who are not in paid work. And we believe this comes from the fact that essentially women are thrust upon them from very young age, face of ideal mother or a wife. And if I'm not able to fulfill that, that image which I'm portrayed, I blame myself, essentially, that I'm not able to do that. And essentially, then I try to compensate it by saying that. So this really we have to discuss and figure out, how we can get women out of this. So, for example, we never heard, means I'm sure a lot of men are supermen, but we never heard Superman awards. But we have awards for like super women, right? I'm not sure we should have those awards. Women don't, because then it's excessive pressure, essentially. Anyway, but education definitely helps. If you're more educated, you can overturn, you face much less violence at home compared to if you're lower educated. Okay, something that we need to have much more dialogue in policy circles and in society as we go ahead. So to sum up, and we'll talk about more of this in the panel discussion, that lot of job creation is required, quality job creation, men are equal stakeholders, and if situation has to change, we must have government, corporates, and society working together. So thank you very much, and we'll talk a lot more.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya, for that very enlightening, rather brisk, and very stark portrayal of the condition and the situation that prevails in women's urban employment. I think you have nicely laid the field for us to actually scan the QR code in order to access the report to see exactly the details that you have very succinctly captured in your presentation here. So we come to the much awaited moment, which is the release of the research report. The report is titled India's Gender Employment Paradox. May I invite our esteemed dignitaries on the stage to do the honors and unveil this very valuable piece of research. Thank you very much. To mark this occasion, we are honored to have Mr. Suresh Raman, Vice President and Regional Head of Tata Consultancy Services at Chennai with us. I request you to please take the stage and deliver the inaugural address.
Good morning to all of you. I'm honored to be here today at this important seminar and organized by Great Lakes in collaboration with MMA to celebrate International Women's Day 2025. I think I think they use the word celebration, right? I think they use the word celebration. I think it's a matter to celebrate definitely. When women rise, the world rises with them. I think we have seen the Western world, how it has risen. I think there are a lot of talk about India in the report by Dr. Vidya. I think very important statistics which has been brought out. Probably she should have taken more time and borrowed my time and spoken a little bit more about the report. So that's what I was feeling about when she told the numbers. I would like to thank Mr. Mahalingam, President of MMA, Dr. Suresh Ramanathan, Dean, Great Lakes Institute of Management, and of course, Group Captain Vijay Kumar for inviting me to share my thoughts on this highly relevant theme, Women at Work, Powering Progress, Shaping the Future. I think it's a very apt title that my speakers before talked about, Powering Progress and Shaping the Future. My compliments to the Great Lakes Institute of Management on the launch of the research report. It's both timely and relevant. Timely and relevant because I add to what Dr. Suresh Ramanathan mentioned about the pendulum swung to wokeism and now the anti-wokeism pendulum is swinging back. I think it's probably the right time to look at this report and see how we can leverage this better. I strongly believe that this report is not just about identifying barriers, but also about offering actionable solutions. Key takeaways from this report will be instrumental in understanding how we can enhance gender diversity, improve recruitment policies, create flexible work environments, and most importantly, challenge the cultural and societal norms that limit women's potential. I urge everyone here to engage with the findings and consider how they can be applied in your own organizations to drive meaningful change. I'm sure the panel will discuss in detail many of these issues. I think a lot of metrics were brought about by Dr. Vidya. I think she talked about that 30%, 89 million, 19 million, all the metrics. I think very important to understand. And she mentioned about a lot of jobs creation. Many of the forums, in fact, we discussed with the government also. It's all about creating more jobs. Then automatically a lot of these things will get solved. In TCS also, when we talk about how we are going to do at the future, most important thing is look at growth. And we say growth is the secret of our energy. When things grow, automatically everything will happen. So I think that is what we need to look at, how to make everything prosperous for us, ourselves, our organizations, and the country as well. Who said change happens naturally? Progress is not automatic. It is intentional. Here, I would like to say a few things. Normally in these forums, I talk about 4 I's. I for intent. Whether there is an intent with the organization to do the right things, right? Intent by the government to do the right things. Intent by the individual also to do the right things. Very important, actually. All these 3 forces have to be in play. Whether intent in terms of recruitment, in terms of providing the learning and growing environment in the organizations, the type of infrastructure and environment, whether it be, I think during COVID, a lot of online courses came into being, right? And what is the investment we need to make? The time, efforts. When I say investment, it is also by the individual to learn and grow. It's also by the organizations to invest the time and efforts for the upliftment of women in the organization, and also by the government. And all 3 things are happening today. So things are much more positive than what it was earlier. And the fourth I is about integration. I think very important to ensure the disparities are not there and how they're integrated, how women are integrated in the organization. And this year's International Women's Day theme is Accelerate Action. That reminds us while women have made remarkable strides, many challenges persist. The reality is, despite decades of efforts, women still face barriers that slow down their growth in the workplace. Accelerate action. If that is a theme, let action be an acronym. A, advocate for equity. C, cultivate inclusive leadership. T, transform workplace policies. I, invest in women's career growth. And O, open doors for representation. And N, normalize work-life integration. I'm not calling it balance. Our chairman of Tata Group talks about work-life integration. And with the mobile world, internet world, it's no longer that people are working from office only or working from home. They're also we're attending to personal things from office as well today. So it's a mix, right? So work life has got integrated, whether we like it or not. The technology has made it happen that way, and we also enjoy that actually, right? It has given us flexibility. So I think very important to understand, and I feel from a tech industry perspective, we have been fortunate because of technology has enabled us. We learned a lot from the manufacturing industry earlier decades, but it's now also time for the manufacturing industry and other industries to look at what they can pick up on these policies and how things happen in the tech industry. Not that tech industry is perfect. Definitely, there is always opportunities to improve. Similarly, the professional services industries, whether it's legal or the chartered accountants, finance areas, etc. I think these professions have shown a lot more for the women to have right career path. So end of the day, it's all about tripartite way of making things happen from the individual perspective, the company perspective, as well as the government. In TCS, we follow a 5-pillar strategy to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think end of the day, it's all about equity, right? More than diversity, inclusion. As long as things are equalized, things will happen. We believe in representation, ensuring all segments are represented. We believe in enablement. There are systems for equitable workplace. We believe in engagement, connecting and creating network for diverse communities, and creating a culture, creating a workplace environment where employees can interact with each other. And here I would like to just take a pause here in terms of when we talk about culture, the interaction with each other is very, very key. We used to have challenges in many industries and including our industry where people wanted to work from home, but it doesn't help them in the long run. They need to interact with their colleagues in the office. It helps them solve the problems faster. It helps them learn new things from each other and so many things, right? And they also want to change. Sitting at home, working 9 hours continuously is, I think, is a bane. It's not a boon. So we believe strongly, of course, there could be a balance. There are people in TCS, I can quote that there are people, women who worked for a very long time from home pre-COVID. I'm not talking about post-COVID or during COVID. When there are genuine reasons, the supervisor and the HR teams decide what's best for the individual. So it is case by case based as well, and also the type of role, etc. And the other thing is about development, building the right skills. I think women need to build the right skills. Especially, I would like to request all of you to think when there is a career break happens, and people want to step in. There needs a lot of introspection on what you want to do and what they can learn. And here organizations also have to step in, which is what companies like us do, how to ensure they have some learning opportunities before they come back and join us. Because technologies are changing today every day. When we talk about advocate for equity, There are organizations who are committing to diversity, equity, inclusion, and more women are reaching leadership positions today. We are creating systems which provide equitable workplace related to policies and infrastructure. But the persistent challenge is the gender pay gap still exists, and women are underrepresented in top decision-making roles. Pay gaps don't close on their own. Equity should be the foundation of hiring, promotions, and compensation structures. That is advocate for equity, right? And cultivate inclusive leadership. I think there was a talk on, she was talking about non-conscious bias, and I think all of you talked about it. When you talk about inclusive leadership, the progress in terms of more companies are focusing on this, building diverse leadership teams. And it is happening, but is it enough is always a question. But the persistent challenge is women still hold only 10% of CEO positions globally, and unconscious biases impact career progression. I think Mali and Dr. Vidya talked about how things are happening at President, PM, and CM levels, but it's not translated, right? Companies like us, we ensure that we build right capability through leadership and role model connects, coaching, and mentoring across all levels, whether it's junior, middle, or senior levels. And it's not just about having women at the table, but ensuring their voices influence decisions that shapes future. We have a lot of success stories in TCS. Some of them have gone into the TCS board, one of them, and another person has also stepped in as a chief operating officer in another Tata Group company as well. Not only within TCS, they are also moving across Tata Group companies. Transform workplace policies. I think we talked about. While flexible work policies and parental leave are becoming more and more common, the persistent challenge is women are more likely to experience career stagnation after maternity breaks, and many industries still penalize caregiving responsibilities. At TCS, we have two things. I think many of the IT industry, tech industry is doing this, and many of the other companies also followed suit. We have something called Rebegin for women to come back after taking a long break as well. And similarly, we have Ethos, an initiative to enable, engage, and develop employees on the maternity continuum extending through their parenting journey. Parenthood, caregiving, or career breaks should not be the barriers to growth. The right policies create pathways, not dead ends. So here I would like to have some anecdotes. For example, when people come back to work, they ask for a lighter role. I mean, that's a wrong thing, and they think some role is better than what they were doing before. They say, can I go into HR? As if HR doesn't have work, right? And in fact, after they go to that particular HR area, then they realize they have to work harder than ever. So people think that the earlier role was tough and the other roles are thing. Similarly, some people said, no, can I do CSR? And when they do CSR, they have to go and meet the communities in the hot sun. They have to travel everywhere. And when they do that, after 3 months, they come back to us and say, boss, my earlier project was better. I was able to sit in an air-conditioned office. So please, I think all of you, please ensure that don't ask for a lighter role, because then you are actually coming down. You are belittling yourself. Never ever do that. You are competing and you want equity. So I think next about women career growth. Women are increasingly entering STEM, right? Finance as well as leadership roles. But the persistent challenge is women still receive less venture capital funding than men, and fewer women get assigned to high impact projects. Companies like us, we have leadership development programs for junior, we call it iAspire, we have middle level, iExcel, senior levels, all to propel the journey towards personal and professional excellence. High impact roles and leadership opportunities should be assigned based on potential and not on past patterns. And opening doors of representation is key. There is growing representation in boardrooms and executive rooms. Definitely it's improving, but it's a long way to go still. Over the past decades, women's representation has increased at every level of corporate management. Most notably, women today make up 29% of C-suite positions, compared with 17% in 2015. But progress has been much slower earlier in the pipeline at the entry and manager levels. Persistent challenge. I think McKinsey and others talk about the broken rung phenomenon, means fewer women are promoted to first level leadership, limiting that pipeline to higher level positions. I think as an organization, we have seen at least 65% representation increasing at the leadership levels, middle and junior, and as well as senior. Talked about workplace integration. The progress has been made, and mental health and well-being conversations are more visible today. The persistent challenge is women continue to handle a disproportionate share of unpaid domestic labor, leading to burnout and career drop-offs. And that's where we need to have the culture that supports balance and supports progress. On a lighter note, I'd like to say, all of you are aware of, in today's world, LLM and SLM. I thought I will coin something called WLM. So all of you guessed it, right? Women's language model. And it's much more complex, much more comprehensive, and adaptive, intuitive, always evolving. And AI processes fast, but women process data faster. In fact, the retrieval of the data is very high. 20 years back, a husband would have had a fight, and the woman will be able to remember everything. The men will be caught unawares, right? So I'm talking about the potential. AI may predict patterns, but women create patterns. I was also thinking on a lighter note again, can NVIDIA Blackwell RTX 50 series process faster than women? I don't think so, probably, right? And women multitask more than a parallel processor and perform tasks faster than an NVIDIA chip. I think Wi-Fi, all of you are connecting. Every time you connect to a network, remember that women's invention made it possible. The first computer programmer was Ada Lovelace, all of you know. The first bug was invented by women as well. So I think end of the day, we are on the right track. But individuals need to invest, corporates need to invest, government needs to invest. The future looks bright and shiny. It's up to us, men and women, to power the progress and shape the future of women. And women need to support women in the career growth as well. So most of the people, I think today we had a conversation where many of the women who have succeeded had a lot of men mentors. Probably we need more women mentors, right? I think tech industry has taken some lead, definitely, but still a long way to go. But AI will help probably further, and we need to leverage AI for that. And the future is with us. And I don't know, proud to be part of Tata Group, and which had illustrious and super successful women like Lady Meherbai Tata, who made the Child Marriage Restraint Act possible in India in early 1900, and Lady Navaji Bai Tata, who was the first woman director on the board of Tata Sons. So I think this seminar is a call to action. It is a platform to exchange ideas, share solutions, and commit to creating workplaces that are inclusive and equitable. Let us ensure a future where every woman can lead, innovate, and thrive without limitations. I look forward to discussions and insights that will emerge from today's seminar. Let's continue this journey of powering progress and shaping a future where everyone, regardless of gender, can thrive. Thank you once again for this opportunity to be part of this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh Raman. Your talk was very informative. I particularly love your unique spin on the accelerate action and creating an acronym for action. Your 5-point strategy, the Rebegin and Ethos programs at TCS, and the very anecdotal experiences that you brought about the Tata Group's commitment to women right from the early days. And of course, This also made me remember Ms. Sudha Murthy's letter to Mr. J.R.D. Tata in 1972 about, allowing women to apply for job positions at Telco Pune, if I remember correctly. Right. So thank you very, very much. Up next, we have another leader in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. She comes to us from CRISIL in Bombay, so she's joining us online. This is a special keynote address from Ms. Preeti Arora. She's the president of CRISIL Intelligence. There is a very brief AV introduction to her, which is 1 minute, please.
Ms. Preeti Arora is the president of Global Capabilities Centers at CRISIL, where she leads efforts to scale and enhance productivity across various capabilities. With a career at CRISIL since 2000, Ms. Preeti has held key roles in ratings, GR&RS, GE, and corporate strategy. An economics graduate and gold medalist MBA from International Management Institute, Ms. Preeti collaborates with business leaders to drive growth and talent mobility.
This segment is structured a little differently because this is going to be a conversation between Dr. Vidya and Ms. Preeti Arora. Dr. Vidya.
Good morning, Ms. Preeti. Welcome to join the session. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Am I audible?
Thank you. Yeah, you're audible and your video is clear as well. Most welcome.
Right.
So thank you, Preeti, for joining us. I know you're traveling. Can you hear me, Preeti?
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you very much for joining us. Just for everyone else, Preeti and I was a colleague in CRISIL. We worked together for several years. Preeti, if I'm right, this is your 25th year perhaps with CRISIL. So
That's
quarter
right.
of a century. So over the years now you have done several hats, right? And several leadership positions changing from, domains to domain. And very recently in your AV, our introduction was that president of GCC, Global Capability Center. But just now she has moved to president of CRISIL Intelligence. Can you just tell us over the years how you have felt the importance of, executive sponsorship from top leadership, how important it is in terms of, moving the diversity as well as inclusion agenda, inclusion of all and diversity?
Sure. No, thank you, Vidya, for first of all inviting me. It's a privilege to be here, and thanks to the Great Lakes Institute as well as the Madras Management Association. And congratulations on your report today as well. Like you said, Vidya, my experience over 25 years, and I've been passionate about the subject on D&I and inclusion, and therefore have seen that over several years now. I would definitely say that the sponsorship from the top, is the topmost enabler for success in this area. And the reason I say that is because it does many different things. One, it really sets the tone for the organization, and leaders play a very, very critical role on how that cascades across people, managers, across teams at large. Second, I think it decides on the investments within a corporate setup as well, right? And at a larger community level too. Because one is about the economics and putting the right level of investment within the company for some of these critical initiatives, but it's also about the bandwidth. It's about the bandwidth of the top management, again, of the people managers, the capacity you would give to such initiatives. And I think largely it helps to modify, behaviors. It helps to evolve the culture of the organization. So I really do feel that the involvement, everybody tends to emulate, what they see around them in some ways. That's how humans are DNA'd. And therefore, what you see from the top plays a critical role. And I've seen that progress over the years in my own organization and setup. So my own experience, maybe I could add a bit of color, Vidya, on what we've done at CRISIL. And I heard Mr. Suresh speaking about the wonderful things that TCS has done, and a lot of them may be similar, but I think maybe I can focus on a few more that have been an add-on for CRISIL. One has been in terms of how we assess performance evaluation of leaders. And I think over a period of time, maybe since about a decade, we've had balanced scorecard methodology where we have called out metrics on what we track. And diversity has been a very, very important talent agenda from a strategic level. So across from our CEO to our next levels to the people managers, everybody would have a metric which has a target, a call out target with respect to diversity, and not just a general diversity or inclusion, but also in terms of mid-management, and leadership levels as well. And there is constant interaction whenever we have with the board about how we're progressing, what is it that we're doing, what initiatives we are taking, right? I think the second would be, just simple and very effective policies, because I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of women colleagues in my previous roles. And I think what came out is that, for instance, we have a very simple policy at CRISIL that whenever a woman employee leaves after 9 p.m. at night from a location, even if they have their own vehicles, our security guard would write their name, their address, their mobile number, and they will diligently receive a call, after they've reached home after a couple of hours to check on their safety and their return, right? We also obviously have someone who accompanies or a car facility of, dropping them back home after 9 p.m. But even if they're in their own vehicles, it's a matter of just showing that care. That we would be concerned, and I've seen so many women come back and say, look, this is just showing me that my organization cares for me, right? I think the typical buddy programs for returning mothers or second career options have been explored by a lot of organizations. But I reflect back to the point you were making, and even Mr. Suresh was making, sometimes it's not so much about the flexi hour roles or the easier roles. It's also about making the choice difficult for women in terms of how interesting the role is. So I've had conversations then women said, I'm coming back. Yes, I might need a little bit flexibility when my child is young, but the choice has to be meaningful for me to make that choice that I want to come back to work, because sometimes it's monetary, sometimes it's beyond that. It's about how enriching the job itself is. So in many cases, it's just about having a good conversation as a counselor, as your manager, to say, what is it that's interesting for you in the long term so that you want to continue and invest in your career. And lastly, I would say, Vidya, it's about first and foremost being an inclusive journey. And I completely agree with you with your point that it's men and women, it's not men versus women. And we have to be very, very careful whenever we talk about any diversity and inequity. It has to be everybody together. We never sponsor when it's all women kind of conversation happening, because it just doesn't help. It has to be about inclusion. And you will see in the US as well, the language changing very recently. It's, of course, there's the new administration impact, but it's also about focusing a little bit more on general inclusion. And I think that becomes even critical. So I just thought I'll share some of the experiences that we've had at CRISIL about those small things that matter, but also the bigger things in terms of the policy, the ecosystem, the learning and development opportunities that you give.
Yes, indeed, Preeti, and I can vouch for what Preeti said about the employees' safety or the women's safety. Well, back, Preeti, in 2007 or something, when I was with CRISIL, on a budget day, normally economics team will work till very late and early mornings, and of course, a lot of research analysts. And even back then, we used to get a vehicle, with, someone to accompany us, at home. So the company has been really very supportive. Preeti, in terms of if we can move slightly now from, what CRISIL does in terms of, enabling women to, move into when they come back to work, and, what another policies are there. What are your own personal experiences and how you have managed this, balance? We talked a lot about unconscious bias here, even from the society that women face. So how has been your journey?
Yeah, I think on the question of unconscious bias, Vidya, I think everybody faces it, and it may not necessarily be only gender-based. It can be where you come from. It can be, the cultural and the regional nuances, right? So I think everybody is conditioned to what they've experienced during their lifetime. I can give you a few examples of, I started my career in the 2000s, right? And I joined the ratings business first in CRISIL, which was primarily about doing a lot of, factory visits, on the ground visit to understand and meet the management to understand the kind of work and business they do. And I would go to some of these, newspaper factories, fertilizer factories, and you would see that, you sometimes are probably the only one in the room or definitely in the minority. And you would get those looks, and you would, in terms of why has, she come instead of somebody more senior, for instance, right? So I think just getting sort of being on your own, having that, focus with respect to what you want to do and how you want to achieve has been important. I can give you another example that, maybe when I was 8, 9 years into my role, when I joined CRISIL, CRISIL decided to set up a new business, right? More on the global side. We required a company and we were setting up in Mumbai. And at that point of time, I was based in Delhi. I had gotten married. I had a 8-month-old son. I was living with my in-laws and husband. And, when this was getting discussed, I got to know through a conversation, right, that there is a new team, seed team getting set up, but it is based out of Mumbai. It's an interesting role. And I was wondering that why nobody has approached, because the credit experience I had was also relevant. So I went and I spoke to my manager at that point of time, and I said, look, I think I want to, look at doing something different, and would you consider? And, the thing was like, okay, we can, but this requires you to move cities. And then I had the conversation with my husband. Of course, that ecosystem is so critical that, we decided to move along with my 8-month-old son at that point of time. But I think, again, this is an unconscious bias to assume that, somebody may be interested or may not be interested. And therefore, what I usually and typically and really advocate is that having conversations is extremely important. Let's not assume what people's likes and dislikes are. And I would just, echo that to all the people managers, is those conversations become so critical. Because, when you're talking about achieving any organizational priorities or goals, it has to align to an individual goal and growth as well. And those conversations become extremely, material for that. The last maybe anecdote I can share with you is that I remember that I used to travel quite a lot. And when I shifted to some of the global business roles, I think my son was that time about 6 years old or so, right? And I used to travel to US for probably a week, 2 weeks sometimes. And so sometimes we would just leave them with our grandparents because my husband was also working and we were dual sort of, working family. And I remember that I was at an airport. It was the first time we were trying to leave our child, and none of us could actually travel along with him. So if you remember, there's an assistant service where anybody over 5 years, you can actually just have an assistant come and travel. And I remember leaving him, and there was a woman's security guard at the airport. And, she just made a comment in her language saying that you're leaving the child alone, is it? To travel. And then she looked at me, and I could see the judgment on her face, right, of how can you do this, being a mother. And I went back, and it did, got me into that self-guilt trip with that you were talking about. But I knew that, this is a way in which, you sort of, you have to create the right ecosystem. You have to rely on grandparents wherever it's possible. It's all right to do sometimes things which you think are okay to do. But I think those are some of the unconscious biases, that you go through both on personal or work life, in your setup. But I think, my advice typically to women and people in general, right, has been that first and foremost, you need to believe in yourself. You need to build your self-confidence. No one is going to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself, right? So I think that's where I feel somewhere women tend to self-doubt much more. And therefore that comes out when we talk about progression. There've been enough and more studies, and Vidya, I know you will be a much an expert on some of these topics about, with the same sort of set of competencies, the way men represent what they can do for the organization. I can achieve X, Y, Z, and the women will be, maybe I'm not ready, right? So I think that becomes important. Second is really to invest in yourself and stay relevant. You have to back the confidence with capability and with relevance, especially in a time and era when things are evolving so much, technology is so rapid, workplaces are changing, expectations are changing. Just staying invested in yourself and taking that time to self-learn becomes important. And lastly, I would say is that don't give up before you need to. Don't overthink on the responsibilities, both personally and professionally. Be self-aware, be clear, because if you value yourself and if they value, the company values you, they will listen. Yeah.
Wonderful, Preeti. Means, yes, I think all of us will agree that, we have to be much more confident. And as you said, unconscious, your manager was looking in that, anecdote. Your manager maybe was actually looking out for you and for your good. But actually we need to ask, are you ready or not ready, and not assume things. That's wonderful. Anything else you would want to share, or otherwise we'll pause here. I think if there is a time, there will be questions, but okay. So we don't have questions, Preeti, right now. So thanks very much for joining us. Just stay on. I think they have some clip to